Heyo, it's your boy Jack Slack, Fights Gone By podcast, coming at you on Friday the 10th of whatever month this is, and we got some fights to talk about. But first, let's jump into the news. Gilbert Melendez is coming back after, 2 years layoff, to fight Arnold Allen, the young upstart from England, who I mainly dislike for giving Mads Burnell the loss that forced him out of the UFC. But that fight's going on UFC 239. Interesting choice of fight, but I suppose Gilbert's not really won anything in quite a while, so stick him in with a young up-and-comer that you want to get some eyes on. Bellator would love to have Gilbert back. They were constantly pushing his wife for some reason a while ago, and Glory too. Same sort of theme, Sergio Pettis versus Ricardo Ramos. That's Ricardo Ramos, not Ricardo Lamos, but said in a racist way. Is on for UFC Minneapolis, June 29th. See, that's like a ho-hum announcement now, because a couple of months ago, we were like Sergio Pettis on cusp of title shot, and then he blew it. So now it's just like, yeah, standard. I presume that'll be at bantamweight, because the other news this week was that the UFC cut Magomed Bibulatov, who is the number 8 ranked flyweight in the world, or the number 8 ranked flyweight in the UFC, basically confirming that division is dead in the water. Just needs to be scooped out with a large pool net. Then left in the hot sun on the side of the pool where the dog can try and eat it. What else is happening? Oh, on the subject of long layoffs and returns, Matt Wyman's coming back. I feel like he's not been in action in like 6 years. Googling now. Yeah, he last fought Isaac Valley Flag in 2014. So does he predate the Reebok deal? I think he does. Ryan Hall's re-signed his contract with the UFC. Manager says he wants to fight twice in the next year. I mean, it's Ryan, so probably not going to happen. But good news that he's back on track. Rob Font versus Cody Stamann was booked for UFC Grenville or Greenville, depending on who you are. Book tickets at both. No, that's a good fight. Cody Stamann, I really enjoyed his fight with Mr. Misha Tate. What was his name? Brian Caraway. And Rob Font, I've just always been a fan of. Massive boy. If he hadn't lost to Pedro Munoz, we'd be talking about him in title contention right now. If he hadn't lost to Pedro Munoz, he'd probably fought Cody Garbrandt in Pedro Munoz's place and jabbed him up. Oh, but he did lose that fight to Rafael Santos. So, okay, fair enough. I was thinking Rob Font was doing much better than he is, but he's always good fun, and he's slapped the shit out of Thomas Almeida, and he just beat Sergio Pettis, and that was quite convincing as well, I seem to remember. So there's all your hot chaff straight down your throat. Let's talk about these fights coming up this weekend. Oh, and final piece of news, TJ Dillashaw has been dropped by Monster Energy Drink. He is just another soldier dead on the battlefield of public expectation. Oh, that statement still gets me. It's so bad. And then that dude was up for Coach of the Year at the MMA Awards, which you'll notice your old mucker Jack isn't on. I was nominated, I think my first or second year in the business. Oh no, it was my first year at Fightland. They nominated me, and Fightland got nominated for best site. And then they were like, "So can we have all your details and stuff, and where you'll be staying and all that?" I was like, "I'm not coming. I don't go to things," which kind of defeats the point of an award ceremony. So I suspect I will never be invited to another one. Not when you've got Big John up for Personality of the Year, Personality of my wank flannel. That's what he's got. Oh, and that's another piece of news. Mauro is going to be doing Bellator this weekend, so it will actually be watchable. I watched, where was it? It was whatever card that AJ McKee versus Justin Lawrence was on. Good fight, and Mauro actually made Big John tolerable. Big John really just takes the afternoon off if Mike Goldberg's there. They just go, the size of the dog in the fight of the dog, fight of the dog in the fight, John. But yeah, TJ Dillashaw dropped by Monster. That's what we were on at the moment. And yeah, really, I mean, he's just going to be out for 2 years, and he's not a huge name anyway outside of MMA. So he's not going to. It doesn't really help their brand to be attached to him. Plus, if he dies of a heart attack because of all the EPO that he's taking, you don't want people believing that Monster Energy gums up your heart. Mind you, it's always hilarious when athletes are sponsored by Gatorade or something like that. You're just like, he's not drinking that sugary shit. He's drinking water in a Gatorade bottle. Or Ribena was the sponsor of... love a bit Bina. Ribena was the sponsor of Wimbledon a little while ago. And Andy Murray had these... They're fairly clear bottles, these Ribena bottles. So it's obvious he just filled them up with water. But no, they're not drinking that sugary shit. If TJ Dillashaw was... And Monster comes in those fucking massive cans. At least Red Bull, I mean, they are ripping you off for the price of it. Or you can get that Tesco Kick stuff, which is like 17p a can and might make you go blind. Like knockoff Panda Pops. But the Monster cans are fucking massive. How can you drink that and then do exercise and not get the shits? That's what I want to know. That's the impressive part. TJ Dillashaw butt plug confirmed. Mind you, Takeru would say that TJ does spar like he's got something up his arse. I love TJ. People jumping down his throat about this cheating. I am pretty, if you're an adult and you know that everyone's cheating anyway, and you know that they've never caught anyone for EPO except TJ Dillashaw because of this new breakthrough in testing, I don't care. Anyway, let's talk about these fights this weekend. So we've got the UFC pay-per-view, and we've got a Bellator event, which is actually pretty good too. Are they the same night? I think they're competing against each other, aren't they? Yes, they're both on the 11th of May. Is Bellator on days? And I can't even keep up with all the shit that's going on at the moment with pay-per-view killing and all that. Apparently ESPN, or the ESPN deal, has managed to make pay-per-view much less successful for the UFC, or rather much less accessible for the UFC. But we'll soon see. Anyway, on this UFC card, what's good? It's a Brazilian card, so there's a whole... Oh my god, just as he was about to say a whole load of Brazilian no-namers, he spotted the queen, Priscila Cachoeira, is fighting the number 573rd ranked pound-for-pound fighter in Brazil, Luana Carolina. Getting ready for the real Carolina, that's what that fight's doing. Oh my god, this woman just cannot fight, and she's apparently one of Jessica Andrade's main sparring partners. And you're like, well, at least we know she's got a chin. That's probably why they keep her around. Easily the worst fighter in the UFC history. Worse than CM Punk by a large margin. But, when you've got to get Valentina a finish, you've got to go pretty far into the Brazilian regional scene to find someone there. What else? So we're going straight from the Betch Correia fight. Oh my god, this lineup! So, hit after hit. We got Wally Alves versus Sergio Moraes, which is a good fight. Both those guys good. Who did Wally Alves guillotine the other? Oh, that was Colby Covington. But Sergio Moraes, obviously, you'll remember him from beating up Ben Saunders a few months ago, hitting an awesome omoplata straight into mount, I think it was, or a back take. I feel like there's also a featherweight Sergio Moraes. But at any rate, he lost that fight to Anthony Rocco Martin. But he fights pretty often. I mean, that was 2 months ago. So yeah, Sergio Moraes versus Wally Alves, that'll be a good fight. Two Brazilians, two well-regarded grapplers. But straight off of that, you've got Priscila Cachoeira versus a person you've never heard of. Then you're straight into Misery Hour with Clay Guida versus BJ Penn. And BJ Penn, not only the saddest sight to see in the octagon now, in addition, all that stuff's come out about his wife being like he's just a terrible person. Really not a great time to be watching BJ Penn fight. But I suppose that will take the sadness edge off it. Afterwards she can come, if he wins, she can come out and say, actually, I was lying. I just didn't want you to feel bad for BJ if he lost. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to fight anyone, clearly Clay Guida you might as well, because he's not probably not going to knock you out with punches. He'll probably, his thing is moving around a lot, throwing point fighting combinations or point fighting single strikes, and then hitting takedowns. So BJ Penn, who still can stop a takedown pretty well, and box passably, may not get beaten up here, but it's still a pretty sad fight. And then you're into the return of Betch Correia immediately after that. Have you ever seen three sadder fights back to back to back? Incredible. She's back against Irene Aldana. Didn't I see Irene Aldana tune up some last the other week? Oh no, she hasn't fought in 2018 against Lucy Pudilova. That was I think I remember that. Was that when she was just marching forward punching? Either way, couldn't care less. But glad to have Betch Correia back, because she's good for gifts, good for laughs, and of course the girl's got an ass like I've never seen. Speaking of which, I'm a little bit annoyed that Rachel Ostovich didn't win that Sports Illustrated photo shoot that I believe was on the line when she fought Paige Van Zandt. Enjoying the photos coming out of that shoot, but just thinking, it could have been Rachel Ostovich, and I'm more of a fan of her than I am of Paige Van Zandt. But then you get an icebreaker. You get Thiago Moises versus Kurt Holliber, who are passable fighters at lightweight, which is just a division full of killers. Being 90th or 50th ranked lightweight in the world doesn't really tell you anything, because that division is just loaded with monsters. And then Antonio Ruggiero Nogueira returns against Ryan Spann, who's 15-5, not a particularly important fighter. Came in off the Contender Series with the guillotine over, Emiliano Sordi, but had his first fight against Luis Enrique back in September of 2018. Was booked to fight Jimmy Crute, my boy, with the Kimura, and then pulled out from injury. And now he's back to fight Antonio Ruggiero Nogueira, who, while he was a sad state before he retired, and is like 100 years old now, hasn't taken as much damage as Big Nog, at least, and then actually knocked out Sam Alvey when he came back, which was bizarre. But once we get Antonio Ruggiero Nogueira out of the way, and hopefully he tools that dude up, because his boxing's not bad. He's the Nog that can actually box, the boxing Nog. But after that, we get into pretty good stuff. You got Diego Ferreira, who's good, top 20 lightweight, maybe top 25, but against Francisco Trinaldo, who you all know I love. Francisco Trinaldo was for a very long time like the UFC's biggest problem at lightweight, because you couldn't get him into like proper title contention because he doesn't speak English and he's 40-something years old. And he's pretty herky-jerky. Like, there's not a whole deal that stands out from his style apart from really good overhand left. And he times some good knees and kicks too, but like, he's quite basic, but he's just wily enough that he gets by and beats top-level fighters in the most vicious division in the world. And they were just like desperate to not have him get into title contention because he was on a streak of like 8 wins. What was it? Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He was on a streak of 7, and they put him in with guys like Ross Pearson. Fair enough. Ross was starting his decline at that point. But Yancy Medeiros is a decently respected guy. And then they were like, please, Paul Felder, take care of this guy. Company man Paul Felder is going to come in and get it out of the way. And then he beats Paul Felder by doctor's stoppage. And then Kevin Lee finally steps in and says, okay, no, you're not actually going for a title now. The guy is incredible. What is he? Is he 40, 41? Born in 1978, so yeah, 40. But it was just so fun to watch him beat, like, guys he wasn't supposed to beat. He hurt Kevin Lee, too. He hurt him with a body shot at one point. Unless I'm conflating that and the Magomed fight. But I think both of them did. The Kevin Lee one was good, actually, because Kevin Lee started hitting him with the open guard double attack, the high kick and the straight down the center, and took him apart that way. But Diego coming off that win over Mr. Boring himself, Rustam Kavalov, just such a tedious fighter. He burst into the UFC and he suplexed a guy to death, and we all went, wow, this guy's exciting. And then he just turned into the most work in spurts fighter in the UFC. But Diego, I remember that fight, and I think he did really well striking and moving in that fight. It was awkward looking, but he did well. But then he's been awkward looking since like he fought Dustin Poirier. When was that? Yeah, 2015 he fought Poirier, and he was like clumsy as fuck in that. But he's really he's making it work for him. You don't need to be textbook, especially in MMA. If you're landing blows and you're getting away from most of the opponents, you're working at a net positive. So Diego coming along nicely. Finished Kyle Nelson. Decision to Olivier Aubin-Mercier, who we were all very hot on for a little while. So yeah, solid stuff. Beaten strong grapplers, actually, Aubin-Mercier and Rustam Kavalov. You'd think those guys would be able to ragdoll him. So very impressive. And that'll be fun. You got like young Brazilian. Well, is he young? No, he's 34. Okay, you got coming into dad age Brazilian against established dad Francisco Trinaldo. Then you got Thiago Alves returning against Laureano Staropoli. Staropoli 8-1, coming off a decision victory over Hector Aldana, who was 4-1, like nothing impressive. He's likely here because he's inexperienced and he's Argentinian, whereas Thiago Alves is the established Brazilian favourite. He's the guy that they all love. He has shrunk so much since, like, if you saw him against Matt Hughes, he has gigantic pecs. Like, you would never need pecs that size as a fighter. But he was absolutely yoked. And he used to have trouble making welterweight, and now the guys he's fighting are all towering over him. But then we've seen a lot more of that lately, as fighters realise that reach is a real thing, and you can use a jab in MMA, and straight kicks. you're seeing a lot more emphasis on being the tallest man in the class rather than the biggest, muscliest man in the class. So that might have something to do with it. But he's got, 17-inch reach at welterweight, not tremendous, and he's 5'9". But he's coming off that decision win over Max Griffin, which was hard fought. Had that rough knockout loss to Curtis Millender, where he sort of worked out Millender's striking, started stepping in on him, step up, left kick to the body and to the back leg, because Millender was trying to stay a nice long distance, and then finally Millender just hit him with a knee as he was coming in ducking and starched him. It was a proper Dan Hooker style one. But yeah, Alves is always fun, comes back with counters and counter combinations into low kicks, which we really like. Don't see a lot of that in MMA. Really struggles if guys have a good grasp of distance, like Max Griffin gave him the same sort of problem by being in and out. And GSP did too back in the day, but if you're in and out, you're not there for a counter combination, or certainly not a swing, low kick combination. Maybe like a comeback with a double jab and chase them into the right straight, stuff like that. But you know what I mean by counter combination, especially that sort of Dutch style hands into low kicks. But expect Thiago Alves to be fed the victory there. And then when you get into these three, the main, co-main, and then the co-co-main, they're good. They're really good. And it's weird because I'm seeing people not too hot on this card, but I love this card. You got Jose Aldo versus Alexander Volkanovski. Banger. All over. Jared Cannonier versus Anderson Silva, which is my, weird fight, but also, okay. And then you got Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade, which is a fantastic stylistic matchup I've wanted to see since Rose won the belt. But we'll talk about Aldo versus Volkanovski first. Not going to count out Jose Aldo because he's just a monster against young prospects. Certainly a very different test for him than Renan Barão. From Barão, you wanted to see like the long distance striking, using the jab, drawing out Aldo's usual overreactions to the jab and feints. And he was doing it to a degree in the first round, and then just as he was looking like he was finding his pace towards the end of the first round, Aldo comes out in the second and just cracks him with a massive left hook in the head, runs in and starts digging body shots to finish him quick. Really good stuff. And of course the Jeremy Stephens stoppage was another one, just smashed him in the body, put him down. Really fighting a lot more aggressive than he has in the past. The criticism on Aldo as the champion was always that he seemed like he could finish these guys, but he just didn't seem to be bothered. It was kind of like, I've landed my 3 good combinations for this round now. I'm going to sit back because I know you can't do anything. In his prospect killer run, it's been so much fun watching him. It's only been 2 fights, but just do this stuff because people were very sad after the Max Holloway losses because Max really had his number and worked him out well. And again, it was that jab and the feints and the pressure. Max's jab is a lot better than Renan Barão's, and he is much better at keeping a high pressure and pace. Renan Barão's, I keep saying Renan Barão. Fuck, who do I mean? Renato Moicano, that's the one. Renato Moicano's jab and Renan Barão's jab. Renato Moicano's jab, not really as slick as Max Holloway's. He doesn't work as the higher pace. He's really more about the low kicks and the counter low kicks and things like that, like he smashed Cater with. He's got that sort of loopy Brazilian punching, which even your straights look like you're rowing a canoe. Your shoulders go up and down. Rose Namajunas does that, and she's in the main event. So. But Volkanovski, nothing like that at all. Volkanovski is much more. I like his style a lot. When he's at his best, he's putting dudes on the fence. Like he'll shoot in, push them to the fence, or rather, he'll kickbox them to the fence, duck in, push them onto the fence, and then he does a really good job of switching between the short takedowns that you normally get along the fence. Picking up the double if you can join your hands, or switching to the single and pulling them off the fence, things like that. The single leg, the outside trip, reap, whatever you want to call it. But he also does a really good job striking on the breaks. He does the John Jones thing where you free your arms, post your head on them, and then you spin into the elbow while they're on the fence. That's when Jones really sort of introduced the spinning back elbow as like a staple of his game, as opposed to that one crazy one against Stephan Bonner. But Volkanovski also likes to hit like a stepping right hook as the opponent circles out. He dropped, who was that, Hirota with? Actually, that fight was just a clinic in striking out of those clinches. There was, more recently, he's been taking dudes down and just mauling them there. It's not like Habib-style mauling, but it is sort of just put them down along the fence, hit him, they get up, you drag them down along the fence again. It's that very short takedown sort of game. But his kickboxing is fun, got a really good lead leg, works well with like left high kicks and left side kicks and things like that. Great jab, really good sort of springing jab. What's it called? Juan Manuel Marquez used to do this a lot. You dip down, you do like a drop step. So you're going into like a short level change, and then you leap forward with like a really stiff jab right from your legs and core. Does a lot of that. Good in exchanges, beats Chad Mendes most recently. But I mean, Chad's a little bit. It was sort of his comeback from being away. Well, no, he knocked out one dude, but it was his comeback from being away for a long time, and his chin had sort of started to deteriorate because obviously Frankie Edgar knocks you out. That makes people ask questions. But then the fight that Chad Mendes did so well against Aldo in was when he could keep the pace high and work in nice counter combinations, and keep pressure on Jose to keep working. If there's a knock on Jose, well, it's not a knock, it's a habit. There's a habit of Jose's. It's that he throws so much into every punch or combination that he can only do it as often as he wants to do it. He can't work at the pace of someone who pushes it on him, and that's how Max tired him out in both their fights. So I think that'd be very interesting. Fascinated to see how Aldo deals with this because he's so difficult to take down. He's the guy for takedown defense if you want to study someone in MMA. I'm trying to think of like better ones. I mean, there's some really good guys out there now, but he was just so known for it. You shoot a double on Aldo, he goes into like the splits, pushes you down one leg until you're on the ankle, and then he'll either limp leg out, or if you can't get his leg free, he'll hop to the fence and then start working from there, leaning on it. Absolutely incredible takedown defense, really good footwork. The pivots worked very nicely in combination with the takedown defense. Really just very graceful to watch move in the cage. So I'm wondering like how Volkanovski, because Volkanovski, I could see him really struggling to get Aldo down, but I could see him doing better threatening the takedowns and coming up striking, which is part of what I really like about his game along the fence. And of course, you flatten someone out, you take away a lot of their power. Jones versus Teixeira. There's been a few examples, but that's a really obvious one. If you push someone into the fence so that their feet are right under them, you can break and hit little striking combinations and duck back into the clinch. As long as you're keeping them from getting into a proper stance, you're taking away a lot of their hitting power. Especially guys who are really good at like the left hook. I mean, the left hook you can throw from your feet parallel, but to really get your legs into it, you probably want a nice stance set and get heavy on that lead leg so that you can throw your weight off it. I'd be very interested if we see some of Aldo's old switch kneeing come back. The Mike Brown fight. That's how long ago we're talking, but he used to do beautiful knees to the body as guys entered. And I think, prolonged clinch exchanges, I think it might be a place where Aldo could bring out his classic knee game again. And of course, every Aldo fight, you're like, well, he's fighting a striker, so I'd like to see him use the low kicks, and then he doesn't listen to anyone. If he doesn't want to throw a low kick, he's not going to throw a low kick. It's fascinating how he's developed over the years, because there's constants in his game, and then there's stuff that changes, because, we go, yeah, well, he's known for the intercepting knees, or he's known for the kicks, and then a few fights later, he's just not doing it at all. Always going to be known for that left hook and the counter combinations, though. I remember writing an article before the Frankie Edgar fight, the first one, where I was like, if I had one rub on Aldo's boxing, it's that he doesn't really have a jab that he uses very much. And then suddenly, that fight is when he decides to debut the Jose Aldo jab, which is now, a common feature. So props to him. I can't wait to see what the old bastard's got. Then you got your co-main, which is Jared Jared versus Anderson. And I like this. It's such a strange matchup, but I like it a lot. Because, Izzy's not known for being a big hitter. He's known for being a precise hitter and a good counter fighter. But Jared Cannonier is known for being a big fucking hitter. So, if he knocks out Anderson, that's stunning. Because Anderson's only been knocked out the once by Chris Weidman. Unless, I can't remember what that loss to Luis Azeredo was way back in the day. Unless that was a knockout. I don't think it was. But yeah. One loss by knockout, so if you can do that, it's pretty stunning, especially as the guy who's now fighting for the middleweight title put it on Anderson through 3 rounds. Swelled up his face, but never really looked to have him that hurt. Michael Bisping dropped him, but of course, Michael Bisping is left hook Larry, so what are you going to do about that? So that'd be an amazing look. The thing about Cannonier, which we're all waiting on with bated breath, is that his cardio has historically been shit. But in that most recent fight against Dave Branch, it looked on point. And I mean, the fight only went into the second round. In fact, checking it now, it lasted under a minute into the second round. But Branch was trying to take him down. Branch was trying to do clever stuff. He was fighting off takedown attempts, and he was landing good punches. And he looked fairly fresh by the second round. Fights like the Glover Teixeira one and the Jan Blachowicz one, you could really see him sucking wind by round 3. The Glover Teixeira one is that's when I decided I really like this lad. Because Glover Teixeira, this was still when people were ultra high on Glover Teixeira's boxing, which is just one combination. But Cannonier was tuning him up on the feet. He was throwing nice combinations, hitting him with like 3-4 shots in a row. And fair play to Glover Teixeira for having the chin to withstand that. But Cannonier looked great. And then as soon as he got taken down, it was just useless. It's always interesting wondering how much a change in weight can be a change in the fighter himself. For some people, they take a punch worse at a lower weight because they're draining themselves to do it. Other people, you're not getting hit by as big people. If you were quite like a small light heavyweight already and then you came down, maybe you find that the guys just can't hit as hard down there. Especially if you do your weight redesign well, or your weight recomp or whatever well, which by the looks of things Cannonier has, because he looks good. At middleweight, he's not looking like completely dehydrated. But I mean, I'm looking at a photo of him now on the scale at 205, and he just looks like he's carrying extra weight. He just looks like he's carrying a bit more muscle and water. It doesn't look tremendously dehydrated. He's on the scale in this picture, but I feel like fair play if he can make the middleweight cut without killing himself. Fantastic. Question is, Anderson Silva, still, as we saw in his last fight, defensively a wily motherfucker. Very hard to hit with a handful of rice for most people. Israel Adesanya has still got him a good amount, but Israel Adesanya is constantly feinting, constantly showing you looks and then changing them. And I'm wondering if Cannonier can do that as effectively. Anderson Silva, the thing is, dudes, firstly, you have to use feints against Anderson Silva or any good counterfighter because you've got to convince them that the fakes are the real attacks and the real attacks are the fake ones. You've got to get them second-guessing themselves. But it's very hard to do that, especially if you're concerned about them and their reputation, as Anderson Silva has. You end up doing feints that don't look anything like your usual strikes, and then you take a big suck of air, bite down in your mouthpiece, and then you run in for a really obvious telegraphed attack. It's very, very hard to do it at the highest levels against very scary people. So if Cannonier can do that, I'll be very impressed. Otherwise, he could just make it ugly, get in a clinch, try and hit Anderson. Because Anderson, grabs the double collar tie. But, Weidman knocked him down out of there. I was specifically thinking about this week because Angela Hill had good success against Andrade, holding the collar tie and then stiff-arming away. But the double collar tie is also just, hit me in the body territory. And especially, it's quite hard to... you can roll with punches while you're holding the double collar tie, but it's quite hard to raise your shoulder enough to roll off, to deflect punches nicely when you're holding a double collar tie and you're square on. But who knocked down... Oh, it's Tisha Torres knocked down Namajunas when she was trying to hold the collar tie. Just ran in, hit her in the body and the head, and then Namajunas fell over. It was very similar to that Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman droppage. So yeah, Cannonier could just try and get on top of him and do that, But I'm very interested. This is why I like this fight. It's just so strange. I've never had cause to think about it before, Whereas Anderson Silva versus most of the middleweight top 5, I go, yeah, I've thought about that fight before, and this is my, this is what I think of it. And here are the key areas of it matching up. But Jared Cannonier wasn't even a thing at middleweight until his last fight. I've had no time to think about this at all. That's probably the most intriguing fight this weekend for me. And it shouldn't be because Anderson Silva's an old man now, but in terms of weirdness, I'm down for that. And then Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade main event, probably the best fight going on this weekend in terms of stakes and stories. I wrote a huge piece on this week. I'm back into writing. I'm feeling good. I wrote that Jacare one a couple of weeks ago, but I wrote a big one on Rose Namajunas this week called A Tough Ask for Rose Namajunas. It's on thefightprimer.com. Go check it out. Basically just taking these girls' styles apart. I think what's interesting about it is that the moment that she won the title, I was like, I'd very much like to see her against Jessica Andrade, because Jessica Andrade, I was like, that's an interesting challenge for Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and Joanna Jędrzejczyk did everything perfect in that fight. She was wonderful. I think that was probably her best performance ever. She was scarcely behind that black line in the octagon, the interior one. And when she was, she'd like hit a nice L step, check the article out, did some diagrams. If you like doodles of feet, that article is up your street. But perfect use of breaking the line of attack, circling out, using lateral movement to diffuse Andrade's straight charges, because she's crude. She's very crude, primitive rather. But left swing, right swing, if it cracks you on the jaw and it hurts or wobbles you, it still works. And when Andrade is hunting the body, which someone pointed out she hasn't been doing as much lately. I saw her do some of it in the Gedalia fight. Obviously, the Carolina fight was so short, but against Angela Hill, the bodywork made all the difference, and she was really going after it constantly. But the bodywork is why I'm interested, because Rose Namajunas, if you saw her fight with Kowalkiewicz, she does not take a body shot well. If you saw the second fight with Joanna hit a couple of good knees from the clinch. Both those fights, Trevor Whitman immediately goes, do me a favour, stay out of the clinch. She's decently strong and she's got good takedowns, Rose, from there. I was going to do a video this week, but I couldn't be asked. Most of her takedowns come off that right hand into outside trip. She throws the right hand and then she swings her right leg around and just sort of falls in on the opponent. She took down Joanna in the last round with that, but it's getting hit in the clinch that seems to do her in, and it's especially bodywork. I've never seen the air leave a fighter as fast as when Kowalkiewicz hit her with a couple of knees to the body in the clinch, and then suddenly the second round, the movement wasn't nearly such an issue. She just walked in on her and started hitting her with knees again. Getting to her the first time is the tricky part, but Andrade's answer to that has always just been keep trying until eventually you catch them, because it's very hard to keep ahead of the opponent for 5 rounds or whatever. Tecia Torres was perfect for like a minute and a half of their fight, and then suddenly wasn't for 1, and then got caught up. So I'm very intrigued by that. It's going to be like, I've seen some very nice striking signs from Rose Namajunas, but I haven't seen this kind of fighting from her. I've seen her, the thing that made her such an interesting matchup for Joanna and so different to Kowalkiewicz, Gedalia, Andrade, was that she's in and out. She stays in the center of the cage. She likes her back to the middle of the cage and then to bounce back and let you fall onto counters. All those other three just walk in behind their face. Joanna Jędrzejczyk's jab was like the most accurate in the sport for a while because she fought 3 people on the trot who just kept putting their face on her jab for 5 rounds, and then suddenly against Rose Namajunas, her jab's nowhere to be seen. Of course, that second Namajunas Jędrzejczyk fight, low kicks made a huge difference. Andrade can low kick well, but she doesn't. She refuses to. No one in her corner has got it across to her yet that the inside low kick would make getting in on her opponents a lot easier. Send her to work with Dan Henderson for a week, and she'd be set for life. Just inside low kick, overhand right. I don't like what's coming out about, Andrade saying it only takes 1 and this, that, and the other, because the fight with Kowalkiewicz could have her convinced that she's a one-punch knockout artist. And typically she isn't. She bludgeons people. She grinds them down by hitting them lots. And that's what she should be trying to do against Rose. Meanwhile, Rose should be trying to change the angle, circle out. And the other thing about Rose is that her stances... again, huge article I wrote on this. Please go read it. It's fantastic. But she uses a very long stance to bounce in and out very quickly. That's the sort of point fighter stance. That's the straight in and out fencing stance. If you want to circle more, you normally have your feet a little bit closer together in stance length, and then you move out, you can sidestep better. If you watch Jędrzejczyk's stance against Andrade, it's very short, and she's just circling constantly. Typically, if you fight from a very long stance, you have to sort of break your stance and circle, like an L step or a classical sidestep, but you don't have that nice sort of like side skipping movement that you can do from a more square on stance. So lots of interesting considerations for Rose, and I'm very excited to see how she works in this one. And of course, the raw strength of Andrade can never be understated, because Rose is very good in the clinch, very strong in her own right, and very technical on the ground. But so is Claudia Gedalia. And at a certain point, being picked up off the floor, there's not many defenses for. And then we got the Bellator event, which looks actually quite fun. Firstly, you got that fucking awful Jake Hager fight. They keep touting this guy's real all-American wrestling chops, and then in his first fight you go, yeah, I can see it, I'm impressed. He's 6'8", he's ripped now, he's way better shape than he was in the WWE, and crushing top player. I think it was an arm triangle he won that fight with, easy takedowns, and you're going, okay, fair enough, this guy moves like an NCAA wrestler, I'm excited. And then they're like, take him seriously because he's got NCAA wrestling chops, but also we're going to have him fight TJ Jones, who is 1-1. His one win came in under a minute by Americana. No one wins by Americana. So fighting a scrub. And then his one loss was by verbal submission in under a minute. So, and if you look at this guy, like, and he's working part-time, he's only fighting part-time. He's working in a beef warehouse or some shit like that. Jake Hager is being paid to compete full-time by Bellator, and they're just giving him this absolute joke of a fight. This guy makes Greg Hardy's last opponent look like Superman. It's just so annoying to be like, oh, this guy, he's a real fighter, he's got real potential, Jake Hager. He's 37 years old. Can we get it done in time? And he's like, I'm going to waste all my time fighting scrubs. Just fucking Scott Coker in a nutshell. Get a nice, easy finish on this guy's record. Then you got AJ McKee versus Pat Curran. I wrote a big thing about AJ McKee and Michael Page for the Patreon boys this week. If you want to get in on the Patreon, go do that. You can go read that at thefightprimer.com. And it was just talking about how they're both in pretty much the most compelling matchup of their career. The biggest test so far. AJ McKee's fighting Pat Curran. Pat Curran was the Bellator featherweight champion back in 2012. And he's been, he was in the title picture for quite a long time. He was so good, in fact, that he went up to lightweight and challenged Eddie Alvarez when Alvarez was at his best. Does a very good job of keeping himself safe. Knocked out Marlon Sandro even featherweight. Marlon Sandro was really well regarded at the time. But yeah, he's very defensively crafty. Takes care of himself well. But his recent problem has been getting injured a lot. He's 1-1 with Patricio Freire, which would make a very compelling rubber match if he could stay uninjured. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, but they're something like 3 years apart. So he's not really got a place in that division at the moment. But that does work nicely because you can put him in with McKee. McKee obviously not fought a tremendous amount of top names. Had a really good fight with Justin Lawrence, which I wrote a lot about. Just beaten John McCapo. John McCapo hit him with some nice counters in that fight, but got caught in a wild exchange very early on and knocked out. So really we get to see what McKee's made of. Really interesting striking game, nothing like his father, which is what put me off watching him for so long. I was like, I've seen Anthony McKee. I'm not sure I want to watch this lead fight. But yeah, lovely jab, stepping up the inside of the opponent's foot. He's a southpaw, so up the inside of the opponent's foot. Nice 1-2 off it. Retreats on the angle to his left and lands the left hand over the top. Great side kick with the lead leg. Turns it into a hook kick if he wants to. Uses a nice step up, kicks the calf, that low kick with his lead leg. Hurt Justin Lawrence with that, actually. So yeah, he's a really interesting character. Very excited to see what he can do here. And then Michael Page versus Douglas Lima. Everyone's picking Lima. I'm not... Michael Page, as much as his last fight was shit, it did sort of convince me a little bit more about him. I really liked his strategy in that fight because he came out and put Paul Daley on the fence, even though he was going to counterfight, which is, Conor McGregor 101. Conor McGregor, a bit more aggressive, actually throws some strikes going forward. But if you put them on the fence and then they come at you, you have all the room in the world to drop away into, and you've got every angle possible that you can float off to. It's not... If they put you on the fence and you're trying to counterfight them, which he managed to do against Dave Rickles, but Dave Rickles really didn't do very much in that fight. He just walked forward. But Dave Rickles got him to the fence plenty by just eating punches and walking. But yeah, you don't really have nearly as many options there. I talk a lot about Michael Page's style in this Patreon piece, so go have a look at that if you fancy it. But Lima, a lot more similar to Paul Daley than I think a lot of people are willing to accept. All about the left hook and the right low kick. Doesn't really throw in combination. There you go. But I think Lima's going to be smart enough to know that he'll have to crowd Page. And I think the other thing is that you can't be scared of taking a punch. Michael Page is a good hitter when he's intercepting people. He's not particularly dangerous when he's leading at people because he does a lot of reaching with his hand. That's a point fighting thing. You fire the hand first and then you follow him behind it. He hits hard when you're walking onto him, but generally he's not a monstrous hitter. I think Lima needs to accept that you just have to tuck a chin, try and avoid it as you pressure him towards the fence, but if he does hit you, just come back. Because Lima's best weapon's the low kick. Well, no, the left hook is built for coming back in exchanges, and Michael Page, compared to Wonderboy and, say, Kyoji Horiguchi, he does not take care of himself nearly as well after his burst. If he bursts in on you, he does a thing where he did against Rickles. He goes in and then he tries to change stances and retreat, just straight on a line. And he does that quite a bit. He gets caught up retreating on a line. Whereas Wonderboy punches and immediately exits the side door. Kyoji punches and either weaves into the left hook and goes out the side door or pushes you away. Page's exits generally aren't as good. And I think that's where Lima can actually do some stuff. Let him come in on you, get your guard up, try and slip it, whatever. Come back with a left hook or the right low kick. Just try and take his legs out when he's close enough and he's trying to recover. When you're retreating but still in range to be kicked, that's the worst time to take a low kick because your leg is unweighted and you just pushed off it and it's all loose and out there and it's the last thing leaving range and it really fucking hurts. And you got Michael Chandler versus Patricio Pitbull in the main event. Fun enough. I mean, Patricio Pitbull and Michael Chandler, both to me, quite limited fighters on the feet. Chandler is just all about that right hand. And he's another example of that, what I call, reactionary head movement, Jose Aldo stuff, where you stand perfectly still until the opponent shows you something, and then you whip your head right out of the way. And that was how Eddie Alvarez got him in the second fight. He just showed him lots of jabs. Sometimes it's a real jab, sometimes it's not. But Michael Chandler eventually went, I'm not moving my head anymore. And then Eddie Alvarez just blasted him. Pitbull, lovely left hook, one of the better ones in the featherweight division, I'd say. Good low kicks, really looked good against Benson Henderson a little while ago. I don't know if I saw his last fight, but yeah, banging puncher. The thing is that he's got to overcome a fairly substantial size disadvantage here. He's not even a particularly big featherweight. And Chandler, all too happy to just lean on you along the fence, or lay on you rather along the fence. He does a lot of, if you watched the fight with Yamauchi, took him down, just laid on him along the fence. Really sad, because I love Neil Melanson, and Neil Melanson is so hot on Michael Chandler. He's my top student, blah, blah, blah. And Michael Chandler was like, I learned everything from Neil Melanson. And then you watch it, and you're like, well, this is really boring. Neil Melanson, why are you teaching him to just sit in the guard and be a staller? I mean, he's landing elbows and stuff, but you're looking at it and going, Yamauchi, where's your wall walk, mate? Would this guy actually do as well against the actual elite in the UFC? Oh my god, he came out this week and he was saying, I'd love if USADA tested me. Just to prove, I'm kind of jealous of people being USADA tested. It was a beautiful sequel to that time that he said he was the man to beat Khabib, a day after re-signing with Bellator. The guy wants nothing to do with the top competition. He wants nothing to do with drug testing. I'm glad he's getting paid huge amounts of money. He's a very entertaining fighter, but stop holding out hope for him to come to the UFC. Man, we've run long today. I was going to do some questions, but I suppose I'll do it Monday. Patreon. I am now doing more and more articles. There was a Michael Page, AJ McKee article just went up for the Patreon boys today. The Rose Namajunas article is not a Patreon one. Check that out. That was from earlier in the week. All of this is on thefightprimer.com. Your support allows me to do this show and allows me to write in this environment where the media, online media is just in decay, it seems, at the moment. If you have an email for the podcast, send it to fightsgoneby@gmail.com. Buy the book Notorious, and most importantly, visit thefightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Paul Daly's double leg bless.